being a place where these connections are so apparent, a place where people can come to get those tangible connections to the poles, the North and South Pole, to other continents. I have a sense of pride and how, festivals like Birds at Niagara show it, and how we have a mission ahead of us now to connect to not only those flyways that birds are able to migrate through and make those connections to, but what about those terrestrial connections that we have and we are a link to here in Western New York? We have the Appalachian Mountains coming up all the way from the south. And here in Buffalo, those animals, those wildlife, those plants that are moving along those Appalachians, they have their connection to the Great Lakes, to the Adirondacks, to the Finger Lakes, the Boreal Forest. What I'm excited to be working on is how can we build those wildways? Put yourself into the paws of an American black bear. And go back 500 years before there was European colonization on Turtle Island, and imagine that you were a black bear living in what is now known as Western New York, and you were going about your daily life. You could have a range that could stretch tens to dozens of miles, up to 70 miles you could roam and ramble. And back then, you could do that unencumbered. All of these other creatures could migrate and move through our landscape unencumbered and freely. Fast forward to today, imagine that you are a black bear in the heart of Allegheny State Park and you wanted to travel up to Lake Ontario. Imagine how treacherous that journey would be today. The highways, the human developments, the communities, and how fragmented our ecosystem looks like in Western New York, but really across the United States. How can we think to protect more than just individual pockets of land, but really work on that landscape scale, knowing that when you protect one little parcel of land, the wildlife that live there, they aren't just interacting with that parcel. They are moving through that parcel, migrating through. They are going to find food on the outside of it. So protecting individual parcels of land is not enough to regenerate a landscape, to reconnect an ecosystem. So what we are doing is we are building on the Eastern Wildway concept put forth by the Wildlands Network, which is a nonprofit organization that mapped out the entire East Coast and said, if we were to protect half of the East Coast for wildlife protection, wildlife habitat protection, left the other half to human development, human cities, communities, where could we do that strategically and build upon already protected and intact areas, and then also build corridors, linkages, or connections from those big core areas to each other to allow that wildlife to move, migrate as they once did, and to also migrate to adapt to climate change, because our climate is changing and animals, wildlife are only going to have three options in order to deal with that change. You can either move, you can adapt, or you can die. Dying isn't an option any animal wants to pick. Adapting is great, but at the rate that humans have sped up climate change, adapting just simply is not an option anymore. So the only option left is to move. So in order to help our wildlife out, we are going to have to give them the space, the connections to be able to move in order to respond to climate change. So when the Wildlands Network put out that map of the Eastern Wildway, we here in Western New York at the Western New York Land Conservancy, we saw that, wait a minute, we here in Western New York have core habitat. And not only that, but we are the core habitat and the Eastern Wildway's linkage to the Great Lakes ecosystem and beyond. So not only do we have a mission to help make that Eastern Wildway a reality, but we have the crucial mission to be that connection, that linkage from the Atlantic Ocean to the Great Lakes and beyond. in a long-winded nutshell. That is what the Eastern Wildway is. It is a landscape scale conservation program where we are figuring out what are our critical areas to protect and how can we connect them to each other.